sometimes we get responses from candidates that haven't been successful to be like, I bet you're a robot on the other side of this. You haven't read my CV, you've not read the application screening questions. I can assure you that every talent partner and hiring managers will sit together and read the responses that you put to these questions.
Quick fire question, a story about how a candidate really stood out to you.
I'll share quite a funny story. They literally stood up and showed us a dance move and they were like, this is what I've done. We were all just like, that is brilliant, but technically they answered the question.
Did they get the job? Hello and welcome again to the Open to Work podcast. This is one of our candidate journeys episodes where we are bringing on businesses from all around the world to learn how you as a candidate can navigate their interview processes. So we're super delighted today to bring on Rachel Grimston, who's the talent lead at Accurx, a healthcare startup based in the UK. And we're going to learn all about their recruiting process. So Rachel, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
My pleasure. So we met, I think, a couple of months ago at an event, and I was directed to the Accurx website and was super interested to see that you publish all of your candidate information and are like really, really transparent with all the information you put out about Accurx's interview process. So it seems like you're like the perfect guest to bring on, basically.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Very flattered.
And I think it's really, we'll get into that maybe in a little bit more detail later. But I think if you are, straight off the bat, if you're applying for a role at Accurx, check out their careers page, because they've got loads of information on exactly everything you need to know and exactly what their recruitment does. A lot of what we're going to be talking about, I think, is going to be public information that's in their website. But let's start off with very high level, introduce yourself and what you do at Accurx.
Yeah, of course. So thank you very much for having me. So I'm Rachel. I'm a talent lead here at Accurx. I've been in recruitment now for about 9 years. I've worked in some really niche sectors within that time. Used to recruit in the lift and escalators industry. I didn't even know lift and escalators had engineers, but there we go. And then in January 2021, I made the move into in-house recruitment. And that's when I started my journey with Accurx. So I joined Accurx as their second hire into the talent team. I think I was a bit naive coming through that interview process because they were saying we're a growing startup, and I was thinking, you're going to say that to a recruiter, aren't you? First day in the role, Louise, who is our head of people, literally handed me all these roles in teams that I'd never even heard of before, product managers, software engineers, you name it. And within my first few months, we grew the team from 60 to being 100 by that July. And as of today, we're a team of around 220, I want to say. So the growth has been wild. We've scaled the talent team with that, and it's kept me very busy.
Nice. And I see that you're in the office today. So where are you based around the world? And maybe let's just talk about kind of your working kind of structure. Are you in office, hybrid? How does it work?
Yeah, no, of course, yeah. So I'm in one of our lovely meeting rooms today, which are like gold dust in Accurx. You've got to book them very quickly. So we're based in Shoreditch. We're on Curtin Road, so really good transport links. We're by Shoreditch High Street, Liverpool Street Station. We operate on a hybrid working policy, so we ask all AccuFolk, as we call our employees, to be in the office 3 days a week, and then you've got that flexibility to do 2 days working from home.
Awesome. And let's take kind of a step back. So why don't you kind of explain to anyone who's not come across Accurx, what Accurx does and what they're trying to kind of achieve?
Yeah, no, of course. So at Accurx, we're building software that enables everyone involved in a patient's care to communicate with one another. A lot of people might not have heard from us before, but if the name does ring a bell, there's a good chance that you might have had one of our products. You might have used one of our products, when the last time you contacted your GP, whether that be through kind of a video consultation or even booking your COVID vaccination. So what we essentially want to do is join the dots within a patient's care. So what we mean by that is kind of how a GP practice can communicate with somebody within the secondary care, so maybe a hospital setting. And we believe that if healthcare professionals are communicating more easily and reliably with one another, patients will receive better care and then have better outcomes.
Amazing. And so if I was just to kind of replay that back to you, so it's essentially kind of making sure that when I go see a GP to kind of get a blood test, if I'm getting a referral, that you're kind of connecting that dot and then also including me in that journey as well?
Exactly like that. So what we're doing, we're saving time for both healthcare professionals and patients. So for example, our products allow GPs to send questionnaires to to their patients. So let's just say, if you're an asthma patient and you need to have your yearly review, your GP can now send you a questionnaire where you can fill out all the symptoms that you have, and they can decide from that point actually whether or not you're all good for the next year, or actually whether or not we should bring you in to the practice to have a bit of a follow-up. But that time it takes to fill in that questionnaire is drastically shorter than what it would take for you to maybe get the morning off work to actually travel and go and see your GP.
And then super interesting, because so when you think about like where you think the business will go and like the bigger market that you're trying to kind of get to, if we think about where, the long range like North Star, what is it that you're ultimately trying to achieve?
We want to be the communications platform for our healthcare system, and that's across every single care setting. I think when you think of the healthcare system, and I was like this before I joined, you just think of hospitals and you think of your GP practice, but there's so many other care settings in that. Care homes, pharmacies, even optometrists on high streets. We want to be that communications platform that all these different care settings are using and connecting all these different care settings together. It
strikes me that this is like a product that really should have been around for kind of years. And, so what are you as like a startup kind of trying to outplace? Like, who are you kind of competing with? What's the kind of current state that you're trying to displace?
Yeah, of course. So yes, I was the same. Coming through the interview process, I was like, how have we not done this before? What we're doing is so impactful. A little bit of a backstory, but my partner's mum's a nurse, and for Christmas, the year that I was applying to join Accurx, we got her a Fitbit, and she really struggled to use that. The minute I said, I'm interviewing with Accurx, she said to me, our practice use that. It is so simple to use. And that for me spoke volumes. The tech that we're building, it's not the sexiest in terms of like what it looks like in terms of piece of software, but people can use it and it is easy to use. And that's what we're doing. We're not trying to overcomplicate things here. We genuinely are trying to solve real life problems. Yeah. And that is, it's just very impactful. There are, of course, competitors out there. One thing that sets Accurx apart is that we really try to get to know our users. Things that we do internally is everybody within Accurx will do a support shift, and that is just sitting on our online chat and speaking to our users, learning from them, what are the day-to-day problems that you're facing when it comes to communicating with your colleagues and your patients, and really learning from them that way. We also do practice visits. So even my team, I lead the talent team. We don't work on the product directly, but Araj, one of our talent partners, was in Manchester 2 weeks ago at a practice, learning from the people using our products, and then taking all the information that he's learned and feeding that back into our product teams. The products that we're building are things that people really want to see because we really listen and deeply care about our users.
Yeah, and I absolutely love that. Because I think, in recruiting, we can end up like kind of working in businesses that are kind of really hard to digest and translate. If I was thinking, there's the old adage of like the barbecue story, like how would you describe what you do at a barbecue, or how do you describe what you do to your parents? And especially in recruiting, I think this is hard, but like especially if you work for like a really complicated technology product, and I'm sure there is lots of complexity, but being able to distill this down to, we want to help you kind of get better access to information, I'm sure you could do it much better into one line sentence that's saying we're basically trying to help communication in the NHS. I think that people will immediately be able to resonate and get excited about that. And I imagine that translates really nicely to candidates.
100%. I think that you can see the tangible impact we've had, and whether that be because you've gone through the healthcare system as a patient and you're navigating your own care, or whether or not you just know somebody that works for the NHS. 9 out of 10 times if you speak to a GP or a nurse and you say Accurx, they're like, oh my God, it's brilliant. I was actually at my own GP a couple of weeks ago just having a checkup, and my GP said to me, like, well, what are you doing after this? And I was like, oh, I'm going to work. And she's like, where do you work? I said, Accurx. I felt like a VIP all of a sudden. She was just so happy to speak about what we're doing, and she gave me feedback, and that was really useful because I then came in and messaged one of our group product managers to say, hey, I'm not too sure if we're aware of this, but I've had this feedback from my practice today. This is what we're doing. And people really, really love what we're doing. And that's just so rewarding, coming into work every day and knowing the impact that we're having on a national scale is second to none. You just can't beat that feeling.
Yeah, and your passion kind of really comes through as well, which is very infectious, pun intended. But, I mean, I come from a family of medical kind of NHS workers, and I will definitely be bringing this up at our little kind of family gathering this weekend to see if they're using it and if they have any product feedback as well. So await an email from the Parker family.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
Awesome. And so let's talk about then recruiting at Accurx. So we've got kind of an understanding of the kind of mission and vision and like the why, which I think is really, really clear. And so what can I expect kind of as a candidate, broadly speaking, moving through the interview process at Accurx? So presumably there's applications and recruiter screens and interviews. You know, what's broadly speaking, what should I expect across all functions? Alderson James are one of the leading people and talent agencies. Since 2013, they've been responsible for over 1,000 people and talent hires, including one in a company that I used to work at. They helped me hire my head of technology TA. So I know the guys there pretty well. They've been responsible for scaling some of the most innovative companies in the UK and the EU. Also recently just launched in the US. So even folks in your neck of the woods now, James, can get involved for contingent, retained and executive search. And they also now do embedded through AJX. So they can do it all.
Yeah, no, of course. So if you're an inbound application, so you're somebody that has found our job online and you want to submit an application, first things first, please do answer the application screening questions. We genuinely read them. Sometimes we get responses from candidates that haven't been successful to be like, I bet you're a robot on the other side of this. You haven't read my CV, you've not read the application screening questions. I can assure you that every talent partner and hiring managers will sit together and read the responses that you put to these questions. So that's the first hurdle, right? So definitely answer those questions.
Would you be able to give me an example, or just speak to like what those questions are and like why you decided to include them at your application stage?
Yeah, of course. So at Accurx, we have our 5 core values, and it's really important to us that candidates align with these values. I've worked for businesses before where they say they've got these core values and you don't really see much of them other than they're stuck on the wall, right? Whereas at Accurx, we genuinely live and breathe our values. They show up day to day. One of our values is being mission driven. And what we mean by that is we want people that genuinely care about the problems we're solving here at Accurx. So on our applications, you can expect to have a question, which is, why do you want to work at Accurx? And what we're looking for there is just people that have really thought about the mission or even done research into other things at Accurx, like our company values and like why our values might resonate with them. So we always ask a question about why Accurx, and then likely to be a competency question for the role they're applying to, which is a non-negotiable skill. So, for example, if that's a sales role, it could be about the kind of businesses that you're selling into and just hearing more about that. It's quite controversial having application screening questions because I've been speaking to talent people across the tech market and they're like, but you're limiting your talent pool because if someone's applying to like 5 different roles, why are they going to put effort into these application screening questions? It's a lot to ask for, but we want people that genuinely want to work for us and we want people that are really going to raise the bar. And we believe that we really do learn a lot about a candidate through these questions.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think I've got a couple of follow-up questions to this, but I do broadly speaking agree with this philosophy. You know, and also as a candidate listening to this, if you listen back to the Open to Work podcast, and you kind of listen out for themes, one of the core themes is don't apply to more roles, apply to fewer roles better. And so when you see these applications, really listen to this because someone is sitting there and reading it, and it is part of how they're evaluating whether or not they want to speak with you. Yeah. And that, spending someone will spend more time than you. So if you're looking for a job, spend the time because someone else will definitely spend that time if they're applying for this role, and that they will end up being more likely to be selected by sounds of it than someone who hasn't put in the effort.
Yeah, 100%. And I can assure any candidates listening to this, we do genuinely read your answers. For some of our roles, we can get inundated with applications and we're still reading every single answer. And it takes a lot of our time as well. Yeah.
And how do you kind of ensure that you're not reading a really good ChatGPT prompt essentially?
Do you know what? It's hard, right? And it's been a big topic within the talent team because it's sometimes it's really obvious. Like we had a response the other day where they've obviously put the question into ChatGPT. ChatGPT throws the question back by saying, "Yes, I will help you answer this," and they literally just copied and pasted it.
As well. Oh,
yeah, and it was for quite a senior role. So that for us was quite obvious. And look, it's not always obvious if someone's used ChatGPT. It's not to me anyway. So we assume positive intent. We don't make an assumption based on the answer and say, "Well, that's a really great answer. It has to be ChatGPT."
Yeah.
We will still speak to candidates. I personally don't think it's as obvious as what Raj might find in my team, because he's very passionate about ChatGPT.
Yeah, it is interesting because more broadly from a recruitment philosophy perspective, I think that AI is not AI applications and using AI in applications is only negatively impacting the candidate long term. Where we will have to be, as recruiting community leaders, be forced to find ways to ensure that you cannot use AI to apply for roles, and that will mean more tasks and more effort and more things like Test Gorilla, who we've had on the podcast and stuff like that. We will have to do stuff like that because people are using AI to apply for volume at scale, and that will make it more effort for the recruiting team, which we just won't be able to deal with that level of volume. To your point, and so it's only going to in the long term negatively impact candidates, which I think people aren't seeing right now.
Yeah, and it will only get you so far, right? Like a ChatGPT answer can get you through the application, but then the next step, speaking to someone within talent, and you can't predict the questions that are going to be asked there and how that conversation's going to go, essentially.
Yeah, James used to say this great phrase, like, no matter how many times you ask AI to rewrite your CV, it can't change your lived experience. And
exactly.
That's great about it. So let's move on. So we've successfully gone through the applications. Our CV has been kind of selected. Our profile, I guess, has been selected by the team. What's happening after that? We are delighted to be sponsored by Metaview. Metaview is the AI assistant for the interview process. Their AI records and transcribes hiring conversations like interviews, intakes, and debriefs, and then provides a perfectly summarized note of everything that was discussed. That means that you can focus on creating human connections with candidates during calls and save time on the busy work of cleaning up notes after every interview. I've spoken to so many recruiters and recruiting leaders who are loving using Metaview across their organizations. It's saving them time, but it also means that they have more data to make better decisions. So for every candidate and every pipeline, hiring teams can now make confident and informed decisions, and recruiters can finally take control of the interview process. The impact on candidate experience is also massive. Since recruiters don't have to worry about taking notes in the moment, they can really focus on being present and engaged with you. Forward-thinking recruiters at high-performing organizations like Brex, HelloFresh, and Quora are all leveling up their interviews with Metaview. So head on over to metaview.ai/open to work to get started for free on your first 5 calls.
Yeah, so you'll then progress to what we call a informal chat with one of our talent partners. That will either be on video or that will be a telephone call. It's really down to the candidate's preference. So they can tell us what they prefer to do. And essentially that call is just digging into people's experience in more detail. We will ask a couple of questions just to understand their experience in a bit more detail, check they've got the relevant skills for the role. We'll check their motivations behind Accurx as well. You'll see throughout our interview process, that is a common theme, but it's because we want people that genuinely care about our mission. And we'll ask you all logistical things like, where do you live? Are you happy with our 3-day-a-week, in-office policy? What are your salary expectations? What's your notice period? Are you interviewing elsewhere? And that just helps us paint the picture of kind of where a candidate's at with their current job search. And then from there on, we'll decide whether or not we want to progress into the next stage. If you fell out at the talent call stage, you will still get feedback from the talent team with a really clear reason as to why that is. Feedback's really important to day-to-day life at Accurx. So we think it's really important that we can kind of show that through our interview process as well. So you always get clear feedback at every stage. Going back to the application, if you fell out of the application stage because you didn't answer our questions or you didn't answer them strongly enough, we will tell you that as well. So you don't have a generic response where it's like, oh, you just don't have the skills. We will tell you, well, your answers could have been stronger or you didn't bother answering the question.
So that's interesting. So maybe you won't want to tell us this, but what's happening on the back end there of your system? So you're seeing the CV, you're seeing the and what do you have like a number of different canned responses that you're basically using depending on what the reason is that you're rejecting them for, or are you custom writing within a template every single time you reject someone?
So we have, of course, we have interview templates set up. It helps us work quicker. At the application screening stage, there are two responses we have, because you're either falling out because you don't have the right skills, or you haven't answered our application screening questions, how we're looking to read the answers, or you've just not bothered. So there's two there. At talent call stage, the template's there. However, we will manually write in the reason we're rejecting each candidate at that stage. So it's not a blanket response.
Yeah, and I like that. I think, if you're a candidate listening, the reality is if you get the earlier in the funnel, the feedback that you receive should be directly proportional to the level of input that you've done in the process to date, right? So if you've just gone through an apply button, and you've been in this scenario, you've been asked to fill out some questions so that you're getting slightly more than you would do you're getting a slightly more specific reason. And the further you go through the process, probably the more detailed and more robust the feedback will be over time. And I think that makes sense for me as like a recruiting leader, makes sense for me as a candidate. And I think it's really useful for candidates to like manage their own expectations and what feedback will or won't look like by organization and candidate. And I think companies should be clear with, we are going to provide this type of feedback at these stages, and you should be aware that that's going to happen.
Yeah, no, for sure. And do you know what? Candidate experience is something we really care about at Accurx. And I think it's so easy to prioritise the candidates that are doing really well throughout your process, because you're excited by them. You want them to be really bought into what you're doing. So you put all your energy in those. But it's really important that even the candidates that are unsuccessful are still getting a great candidate experience, because a rubbish candidate experience, that has a knock-on effect of future applicants. Let's say someone had a really rubbish experience with us and their friend's saying, I've seen a role at Accurx, I want to apply. Well, don't bother, they give me very good feedback. It's things like that will really have a knock-on effect on how we succeed here at Accurx.
And I think that is one element, but I think it's even like a revenue problem. I always say, you're not just how you reject people and how you manage your candidate experience has like a direct relationship with your revenue. So if you have my wife, she doesn't, but let's say an example, my wife works for the NHS and they're going through an Accurx like tender, and I'm like, I just had like a terrible experience with Accurx, that it completely ghosted me. I went through like 3 rounds of interviews, blah, 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 and I'm like complaining about them, and they're going through an RFP for your product. What do you think the likelihood is there that they're going to buy? Probably reduced. And so it does have like a functional impact, especially for something that's widely bought. And companies need to really understand that how they manage their candidates is a marketing strategy as much as anything else.
100%. And look, going back to what we do here at Accurx, everybody will be a patient at some point in their life. So it's really important that we kind of keep that strong employer brand and we treat people with kindness and respect. Yeah,
I completely agree more. Couldn't agree more. So just to move on. So in the recruiter screen, just to summarize, you're going through like the kind of general like admin kind of questions around like process, availability, salary expectations, working structure and enablement. And then will you do like a couple of competency-based interviews questions?
So within the talent call it's a really collaborative way of hiring here at Accurx. Our hiring managers really support the talent team and vice versa, so that your talent partner and your hiring manager will have sat down and say, okay, let's decide on 2 questions here, which we want candidates to answer on this screening call to check that they have those non-negotiable key skills for them to then progress on to the next stage. You might find that it stays quite open-ended, because it allows talent to dig into certain areas further. But you can expect to be asked kind of a couple of competency questions on that call as well.
Okay. And then so presumably there's also a space for candidates to ask questions as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So we'll always make sure there's kind of 5 to 10 minutes at the end of that interview for candidates to ask us questions as well.
Perfect. And then so if they've successfully passed that stage, or you decide to move a candidate forward, what can they expect after that?
So you'll then progress on to a competency interview with the hiring manager and likely one other person in that team. So where possible, we do try to pair interviewers together. The reason for that, it just limit subjectivity and bias creeping in, because you've essentially got two people on that call, and interviewers afterwards will debrief, and then you can kind of call each other in, if you like, by saying, oh, actually, I think you're being a bit subjective here, or, you know, so working together on that. So you're likely to meet two other people within that team. If you're applying for one of our engineering roles, you'll also be asked to do a technical take-home test alongside that competency-based interview.
Okay. So once you've gone through because I'm, I guess, I'm trying to get an understanding of, is it hiring manager screen and then like a panel, and this is part of the panel, or is that separate? Are those two separate stages? Yeah. So
I'll answer it again. Yeah. I'll answer it again.
So after you've gone through the kind of recruiter screen and you've decided to move the candidate forward, what can the candidate expect next?
Yes, you'll then progress on to what we call our hiring manager interview. And essentially what that is, it's competency style questions. Tell me about a time when you have. And the idea of that is, A, to meet the hiring manager, who more than likely is going to be your direct line manager, and just to get a real sense of your experience. We go into a lot more granular detail on the hiring manager interview than you would have done on your talent call with someone within the talent team. Where possible, and we can't do this for every role, but where possible, we do try and pair the hiring manager up with another person in their team, and that's just to limit subjectivity and bias where we can. If you're a technical candidate, you're applying for one of our engineering roles, you'll also be asked to do a technical task take home alongside your hiring manager interview as well.
Okay. And then we'll come back to kind of interviewing more specifically in a second. So once you've done that hiring manager kind of potential paired hiring manager interview, is there what happens after that?
Yeah, so then you'll go on to our final stage. Now, the final stage involves 3 different steps. It could be 4, depending on the level of role that you're applying for. But all candidates can expect to do our values interview. That interview is sat by absolutely everybody that joins the business. It doesn't matter what team you're joining, what role you're joining. We ask all candidates to do this interview. And that's essentially to check that our values as a business align with the candidate, and also vice versa. It's really important that candidates thrive when they join here at Accurx. So that interview is testing that kind of values, ways of working fit. Candidates will always get a demo of our product as well. And
Brilliant.
A lot of candidates, when they see product demo, they go to me, am I going to be giving someone a demo of your product? But I'm going into an executive assistant role. Why would I be doing that? And I'm like, no, this is us giving you our time back. You know, we appreciate that you've spent a lot of time with us throughout this interview process. And I'm sure this has come through a lot during this conversation. But it's really important that people are bought into what we're doing. And a great way to do that is to show what our product does firsthand. You'll also meet somebody within the process that you've not met before. So it's a great opportunity to start really painting a picture of, from meeting all these different people, what it's really like to work at Accurx. So you've got the values interview and the product demo, which is standard across all roles. And then for majority of our roles, there'll be a task interview as well. And that will be a task designed to test a candidate's experience. We think that task interview are a great way to bring the best out of candidates and kind of really show the experience that they have, aside from your competency interviews. Yeah.
Okay. And so with the task, what typically can you expect as a candidate for that time? I know they'll vary. They should vary wildly from role to role, but like around a theme, like what should you expect? How much like level of effort should you expect going into a task? I know they'll vary wildly, but it'd be good to get a sense.
Yeah, no, of course. So where I'd say majority of our task interviews, you'll get around kind of 5 days to prepare for the task, depending on what the task is asking you to do. It's very rare that we do on-the-spot tasks at Accurx, because it's very rare that you're actually given an on-the-spot task to do day to day. We worked with an external diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging consultant that gave us a lot of feedback on our interview process. And they shared with us that actually giving someone kind of 24 hours for an on-the-spot task feels fair, because that's kind of the reality of most roles. You will get a bit of prep time. So depending on the task, depends on the length of prep time, but you can expect anywhere from kind of 24 hours to that 5-day period. The tasks really vary, again, role to role. A lot of them are collaboration tasks. Collaboration is something that we really care about here at Accurx. So it's really important that we can see how candidates can collaborate with others, leaning on experience of those in the room and really kind of taking people on that journey to get to that end result of a task.
So you shouldn't expect any of these, give me your 90-day plan sort of tasks.
No, you shouldn't expect those.
Good. What I think resonates with me here is that these tasks sound like, and please tell me if I'm wrong here, they are like genuine representations of the type of work that you're going to be doing, versus kind of just asking you to do a case study for the sake of doing a presentation.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think throughout our tasks, you get a real flavour of what it will be like to be enrolled at Accurx. Some candidates have seen our tasks before and they're like, actually, from seeing this role isn't for me. That's fine. You can kind of self-select out at that stage, but it gives candidates a real idea of kind of the people that they're going to be working with, the kind of problems they're likely to solve in role. And then, if they're successful in getting to that offer stage, hopefully they can paint this real clear picture of what life at Accurx is genuinely going to be like.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Like some of the best case studies or work samples I've ever done have genuinely been work samples, and they're based off of something that happens to you every single day, or like a way of working. Like what really frustrates me is when you ask people who don't present as core part of their role to come and present on something, and that they can get evaluated on the quality of presentation that they have to give, because it's just so rare that you would go into business and wouldn't have all the corporate materials. You wouldn't have like someone who's reviewed it 4 different times from like a different design team. Like, it just is so unrealistic. But the idea of doing like collaboration sessions and work sessions are really realistic, and this happens all the time in work. And for testing that as part of a skill, I think is really underdone. Because it takes effort to create a good case study and create a good work sample, that you have to actually think about it. That's why so many people do 30, 60, 90s. It's just a casual throwaway because they haven't really thought about what they're trying to assess.
Yeah, of course. And look, if you are a candidate listening to this and you've been asked to do a presentation for one of your interviews, you will get a really clear brief of what we're looking for within that. And a lot of the time we say, like, don't spend hours polishing your slides. The way we do presentation decks at Accurx, of course, it's going to be different to how someone's doing it at another company. We're not expecting you to be able to like do a presentation like for like how we will do it at Accurx. What we're really testing is just the information they're presenting, right? It's not about how polished it is. It's not about can they present in the Accurx way, if you like. We know they can't. They don't work here already. So we try and make things really realistic, and we be really black and white with the things that we're testing and the things that we are not looking for.
Yeah, I love that. So this is part of, as you mentioned earlier, the work sample is done in every interview or in every kind of interview process, in addition to competency-based interviewing. And so this is, just to kind of clarify what that means, as you said it earlier, it's questions that basically are asking you to speak about your past as an indication of whether or not you could kind of do the job in the future. And it's called behavioral interviewing in some respects as well, and often sounds like, tell me about a time when. So tell me about a time when you've hired, 30 people in 6 months, which sounds like something that you'd have to do all the time. And what is your advice to candidates who are preparing for their competency-based interviews at Accurx?
Yeah, for sure. I would always say research interview techniques like the STAR or CARL method. So if we just focus on the CARL method there, it stands for context, action, result, and learning, taking interviewers through that journey. And it sounds like really basic advice. Sometimes we'll give candidates that advice when they fall out of process and that they seem a bit taken aback by why have you shared that? That seems obvious. But by taking interviews through that journey, it means that we get to see everything we're testing for. The learning part is exceptionally important at Accurx. We have a culture here based on accountability, and we believe that by making mistakes, you're going to gain learnings from that. So we always want to hear from candidates, what have you learned from these situations? We know that life isn't perfect. We know things are going to go wrong, but it's all about what you can learn from being in certain situations and how you reflect on those situations to make you better. So you'll often find that within Accurx's interviews, you'll always be asked, what have you learned? What can you tell us about this? That's really important to us.
Yeah. And when you're What do you think is like kind of one of the most consistent mistakes maybe that people are making when they are responding, if they're unsuccessful, that they're making in kind of their response structure or in their interviewing?
I think it can be structure. I think sometimes candidates aren't concise enough. And look, interviewing is so nerve-wracking, but it's really important that you're answering the questions that you're being asked. And it's absolutely okay as a candidate to say, can I have a couple of minutes? Can you re-ask me that question and then I'll try again? We train our interviewers to be coaches to candidates. We want candidates to succeed, which is why we give candidates so much information. So if they're not getting to the crux of the answer, just take a breather, ask to go again. That's okay. I would say another mistake I see candidates do is that whenever we ask questions about maybe where a candidate's made a mistake, maybe where they've made a bad decision, candidates default to spinning a positive on that. And I think they're thinking, well, they're tricking me out. They don't want to know where I've made a mistake. They want to know how great I am at my job. But I promise any candidate listening to this now, we want to hear about the times that things haven't gone so well, the times you've made a mistake and you know, you've had to like really go into action mode to try and rectify that. We really care about those kinds of things. So yeah, I'd say the mistake there is that trying to spin a positive on what is quite a negative situation. We want to rip the Band-Aid off. We want to hear about the times that like things haven't gone so well.
Yeah, and you use that phrase there, you know, we're not trying to catch you out. And I think that is so important when you're hiring. Like you actively want the candidate to be successful. You're assuming best intent. Like everyone wants this person to be able to demonstrate their skill sets in the best way possible for them. And using Carl or STAR is just a way of like, well, I was going to describe it as it's a way of enabling you to structure your answer in a way that's concise. Yes. But it's also, if you do practice it, it's a way of having all of the information you need at the top of your head. If you think about like a filing cabinet, you're not having to like search through to the bottom of where that example is. You have it to hand right there. So going through and doing a bit of like practice beforehand and making sure you know all of your examples off the top of your head and that you've gone through and written them down somewhere before going into an interview, I think will really set you up for success. And then also, I love the authenticity behind, you know, we learn so much from our mistakes, and we made many mistakes as we've gone through just this episode, which will be edited out. But, you know, we'll know better for next time as well. And that's such an important part of the learning. I'd love to, I mean, if you can, I'd love to also hear about kind of the offer stage. So, I mean, what you can expect, but then also like how you kind of think about compensation for new hires.
Yeah, no, of course. So on all of our job adverts at Accurx, our salary bands are published. It's very black and white what we're offering for this role. Now, we always ask candidates their salary expectations, but we will also explain to candidates on that initial call with talent, the way we make salary decisions is based on how you interview throughout that process. So, of course, we'll factor in your salary expectations, but if you're asking for top end of our band, we expect you to be performing like you are at the top end of that band. And if you're not, we'll be just really open and honest about the interview process to say, look, this isn't looking very likely. So we have a lot of materials in place to help interviewers be objective with what good looks like throughout an interview process. We have progression frameworks internally as well, so we can see, you know, who in the team is a high performer right now, where do they sit in their current salary band, and where does that compare to this candidate who's either done a really fantastic job in the interview process or has just done okay. So we base our salary decisions on how somebody interviews, not necessarily just on their salary expectations.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting, like a really important discussion, right? Because when we think about like we talked a bit about compensation frameworks and stuff like that, and this idea of having the band, and it's not as easy as where I want something in this band. I want to be the maximum band, because there are all these other considerations around like internal pay equity that someone's taking into account, and like, you know, can we afford? Is it appropriate to pay this new person more than the highest performer on our team who's got like 3 years of track record behind them and stuff like that? And like these are all conversations that are happening behind the scenes that's enabled by the Rachels of the world to ensure that there's an appropriate balance on you know, and there's a long-term success for the entire team. Like it's not just a one-man sport or one-person sport, it's a team sport. And so that's what all of these conversations are happening behind the scenes when you give those your kind of salary expectations. And so it's interesting to hear as well, like how that works in action, I think, for candidates, so they understand that like this is a conversation that's happening like all the time, and you can be dynamically placed across that that compensation like line based on your direct performance. And so if you're asking for the top of the band, you have to be kind of performing and have the skills that are equivalent to what they would expect at the top of that band.
Exactly.
And if you're not, they'll just they can't afford to hire you in that respect, and you have to walk away.
Yeah, exactly. We try and keep things really transparent here at Accurx, really objective and really fair.
Yeah. Well, that sounds. I've loved what I've heard so far, and I think candidates if this can get this consistency process across most businesses, a lot of what you're talking about transparently, I would consider like best in class, and the bar that we must be setting for candidates around the world in how they interview. The transparency that you're showing, how you think about your competency frameworks, how you think about your work samples, your offers, and stuff like that. Like all of these elements all contribute into having a best-in-class candidate experience, but then also best-in-class business outcome. And those two things go hand in hand. And it's clear that the values are really interwoven through the Accurx process. So a couple of like quick fire questions just to round us out. What's like the most common mistake you see by candidates?
Not answering our application screening questions. Not being open to sharing mistakes and failures. And a really big one is not taking talent up on that 15-minute prep call we offer you at the final stage of our interview process. On our interview confirmation for that final interview, we offer a 15-minute prep call with somebody in the talent team that is literally going to set you up for success for that next step. Now, you can find all that information in our candidate hub if you want to look at async, but you cannot get any better, I don't think, than actually getting someone from talent on the phone to walk you through each step. And you'd be surprised at the amount of candidates that don't take us up on that offer. So take it. It's there for a reason.
I could not agree more. It's wild to me, especially as like a candidate who's been through on the other side of this, like how infrequently recruiters offer me prep calls. And nowadays, it's like I've seen a drastic drop from it. Like if it was my team, you'd be offering prep calls almost at every single stage. And then how infrequent and how often I have to proactively ask for prep calls. It's very, very rare nowadays. So I think always pick up on it. It's a really important differentiator, and it helps you understand exactly what you're getting yourself into, and helps you build a connection with the recruiter as well,
100%.
which over time is really, really, really important.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So I'd love to hear about a story, quick fire question, a story about how a candidate really stood out to you.
So there's two ways I can answer this, and I'll share quite a funny story to start off with. So one of our values at Accurx is continuous improvement. So we tested this in our values interview, and when a candidate was answering the question about what they've done to improve themselves in the past year, they literally stood up and showed us a dance move, and they were like, "This is what I've done." And the interviewers, I don't know how they did it, but they remained professional. Straight face was on, and then it's when they came out of the room and they shared that with us, we were all just like, that is brilliant, but technically they answered the question.
I love that. Did they get the job?
They didn't sadly get the job.
Did this contribute though to whether or not they got the job?
No, they didn't. The interviewers were actually really great about it. They were like, it actually made my day a little bit because it's just a very niche way to answer that question, and we've never seen that before. Amazing.
Rachel, like that's so super interesting. Our final question we're gonna ask is, what is your kind of top 3 recommendations for candidates who want to work at Accurx?
Yeah, so I guess recommendations to aid you through the interview process. Again, it's going back to the fact, like, take us up on the prep call, utilize the external materials we've put out there. We've done it for a reason. We genuinely want you to succeed. So use them as your research. I think when you join Accurx, a top tip that I give all of our new joiners, in your first month, you are not going to be as busy as you are in your second and your third month. So use that time to get to know the business by just putting in 30-minute coffees with different people across the organisation to really learn and understand what each role does and how that connects to our overarching mission. It will really help you paint the picture of life at Accurx and ultimately make some really strong connections within your first 4 weeks.
Amazing. I love that. And I think it's a good recommendation for anyone joining any business. Understand the business, spend time listening. It's such a great, such an important way to start a job. Thank you so much, Rachel. That was such a great conversation. I really enjoyed, hearing more about the Accurx interview process and, how you support candidates. It seems like you're doing a lot of things right. And I'm sure there's also a lot of learning still to kind of be progressed. But this will hopefully help so many candidates in understanding, what to expect through their interview process. So thank you so much for coming on.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure chatting to you.
Awesome. And so if a candidate is listening to this, where should they go to find more resources about Accurx?
If you go to our careers page, so accurx.com/careers, you will see our candidate hub. On that homepage, I would just sit and read that. It's got so much information about our benefits, life at Accurx, each different business department, familiar faces throughout the interview process. That will tell you everything you need to know, and hopefully that will sway you to submit an application or reach out to someone in talent.
Amazing. And for any candidates going through that process, good luck. You'll be in safe hands by the sounds of it.
No, we're looking forward to meeting everyone throughout.
Okay. Thanks so much, Rachel.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Cheers.